Looks like Renee's recording. I guess you can hear me. Yeah. I'm a little nervous right now because I was
Yes,
having.
we can hear you.
Okay, so having so many problems here. All right, so I guess we ended on, well, does anybody have anything before we get going here? Anything on anything that we've talked about so far?
Nope.
No questions?
Nope.
Everybody's
Don't
good?
have any marshmallow moonshine, I know that. Just saying.
Who said that? Where's all my videos? Nobody here is, I got no video. All I have are names. Bad enough that I can't see you guys in real time. All right, so we
Hey,
ended,
Jim, I did a little
yeah,
research on that letters of marque and reprisal. It's only between warring nations. So that isn't just random people that you can sign up. To get a letter of
Right, we
marque
had to
and
do-
reprisal.
there had to be a declaration of war before they could do that. It's not like they could tell us we could go
Right.
right now and seize yachts. Although I think
Right.
we should change that because it's going to make my side job hard once I retire. So I'm going to petition the government to change that. But no, you are right.
Right. I got your
Everything was
back.
under the declaration of war for that. All right, so I was gonna go back. I think we're gonna finish, if everything goes right tonight, we should finish section 8, and then we can do a quick recap on it next week or this week if we have time. So we ended with clause 11, right? Declaring war. Grant letters of marque reprisal, make rules concerning captures on land and water. So on we move into the military. We will start here with Article 1, Section 12, which gives the Congress the right to, the authority to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money that use shall be, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. So it's kind of interesting. So what do we think, besides David?
I think this is a little bit about what we talked about last week. The fact that the Congress has the declaration to declare war power. And if you're looking at the everyday Constitution, page 87 there says this clause gives Congress great military power and can draft citizens into the armed forces and make them obey military law. So you're not declaring war, but still drafting people in Korea and Vietnam. So,
All right. But what's interesting on this to me is they give them the appropriation of money to that use shall be for a to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. That's the part that is intriguing to me. Any ideas?
I like that in general because the House is the body that is supposed to initiate spending, and they are reelected every 2 years.
All right. Fair. So you got to remember what our founders, one of their biggest fears were. And I'm sure Dave's probably chomping at the bit to chime in here because he knows what I'm probably going to say here. The Anti-Federalists especially were so concerned with having a peacetime standing army here and limiting their funding to every 2 years gave them the ability to control a little better that standing army. So that obviously their fear was that the federal government would end up using that standing army against its own people. And really, I mean, you guys, Brad, your budgets are every year, right? So it's not like they're giving you a 2-year budget.
I remember it every year. I don't know if they've done a 2
I
year
think
one
it is.
or
I think
not.
it is. They're not allowed to go for a longer term than 2 years, but as of right now, I think they're doing every year.
Yeah, and it seems like they're using it as leverage every year too. If you don't give me this, I'm gonna not fund the military. So I think it is every year right now.
Dave, you want to chime in?
Yeah, it's every year.
Oh, is David Sands here?
I am.
Bro, I've been waiting. I wanted you
All
here when
right.
I tried it.
All right.
You haven't tried it yet. David Davis, anything?
Yeah, I added the definition of army because I think in the next couple clauses here, this is probably going to come up. And what is a 1755 definition of army is really simple. A collection of armed men obliged to obey one man. Secondary usage, a great number, like an army of ants. So that's a pretty simple definition of army.
Kind of a scary definition of army.
It kind of is. It kind of is. It's loose, but I think if you look at the Revolutionary War, I think some of those organizations of people were formed very loosely, getting whatever they could together. So I think the idea of army back then was a little bit more loose than we might have today.
Right on. So yeah, the Constitution here is going to ensure that Congress obviously maintains control through appropriations, so that the same thing as declaring war, right? The president can decide he wants to go to war with whoever he wants, but if he doesn't have the appropriations, he can't do much with the war. Same thing with the army. If the president decides that he wants to use the army for nefarious reasons, all they have to do is defund the army, and he's got, which is why they have to go every 2 years. Anything else on that one? Nothing else? Everybody understands it?
I'm good.
All right. Well, we'll move on to 13 then if nobody's got anything. Oh, Renee, yeah. I'll get with you, Renee. Number 13, clause 13 is the Navy clause. And the Navy clause is that they have the authority to provide and maintain a Navy in the clause. Kind of interesting that they don't demand appropriations and funding limits. I think we talked about this last week a little bit, that the founders were much more concerned about the armies and the standing armies than they are about the Navy. Armies are certainly, in their words, much more of a tool of tyrants than the Navy is. I think they wanted stricter controls. What did I have here on the Navy? The only argument to that, really, there wasn't much argument for the Navy clause. And you got to remember, back at the time of the Constitution, almost all of our wars were started on the water, right? The navies that was the big force back then. We didn't have planes flying over and dropping troops. We didn't have troops marching over to the United States from Great Britain, obviously. So the Navy was just kind of a thing that I think was always expected to be. Obviously, the anti-federalists who were worried about the big, strong central government argued that instead of defending American commerce and guaranteeing American neutrality, creating a Navy would only serve to provoke the European powers and invite war. I don't know if that's true. I mean, we had War of 1812, and the Navy actually came through and saved us. Dave, anything? David?
Nope.
Davis?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was looking up another definition. Yeah, I think it's very notable that there was really no attachments provided for making and supporting a Navy. The need for it was so obvious that it didn't require any further words in that clause, and nobody back then would have questioned the necessity of a Navy, especially for defense. I mean, obviously, if somebody's going to come over here, they're going to have to put people on the ground, like happened in the Revolutionary War, and you're going to have to push them off.
But the only way to get them over here on the ground
Right. Yep.
is by ship.
Yep. So you're going to have a Navy. So it's interesting to me that, what is that, 5-6 words? And there it is, poof, there's your Navy.
Somebody else had something?
No, the Navy was there against the Barbary pirates. That was like their first official action.
It was. Hold on, where am I at here? Yeah. So there's been no changes to the Navy clause, at least, has not changed much. National Security Act 1947, however, they did downgrade the Department of the Navy from a cabinet position, cabinet department, and created the Air Force as a separate branch of the armed forces. Now, these are the only two branches they talk about. And I can't find much on the Air Force. I don't know how, I would have to read the National Security Act of 47. The only two branches that they have authorized are the Army and the Navy. Now, got to remember that the Air Force started under the Army, and the Marine Corps is currently under the Navy. So,
What about Space Force? I mean, bringing it to modern day, what, is
I
that a
think the
legitimate?
Space Force fall under the Air Force?
They're independent starting this year. So up until December 2019, they were part of the Air Force, and the National Defense Authorization Act signed last December made them independent. So that's kind of where I wanted to go
So
with
does
this.
this seem to be the trick then? Is that you put them under another branch of the military and then you fall under the Defense Authorization Acts to remove them from that?
Yeah, I was just doing research on that. I'm not exactly sure how like you said, how the Air Force split off, but it was similar because the Army was, so the Air Force was under the Army, and then it.
Well, it was the National Security Act of 47.
Okay.
All of a sudden now we have an Air Force.
I think originally if I recall aviation history, I think some of the first use of aircraft, both balloons and fixed wing, was originally spotting for artillery. And so that made those craft sort of creatures of the Army. They had to be tied to the Army to spot.
The actual Air Force was under the Army. I mean, you remember when?
Right, right. Yeah, I'm going back to the origin. That one to me makes sense, to have the Air Force having started out as the Army. And then as airplanes progressed, obviously it takes on a whole new, entirely new level of capability. And, obviously would then have to stand on its own.
And same, it makes perfect.
Can I just say real quick that why is it that this brand new Space Force just got mentioned before my Coast Guard?
Because they're Department of Defense, not Homeland Security.
I'm just saying though, I mean, Space Force, Coast Guard, come on.
Right now, Ben's going through his recruiting process, our son.
I'm just gonna let it go.
In order to,
Who's talking?
Jen Kilby.
Oh, you're
in
really
order-
low.
No, it's probably my little headphone thingies.
It's better when you get closer to your ear.
Much better.
Yeah. Is it better now?
Yeah.
In order to enlist into the Space Force, you have to go through the Air Force first as of right now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Does he have a guaranteed enlistment contract for Space Force or?
No, he'll go to the Air Force, but they did talk to him about Space Force.
Okay.
So
Great.
as of today, in order to get to the Space Force as a 18, 19-year-old young man or woman, you have to go to the Air Force first.
But not the Coast Guard, right? Just to be sure.
The route is not through the Coast Guard. No.
Hey, look, Chris, man, it's all good. I would have gone into the Coast Guard knowing what I know now, maybe. I mean, if I could have got promised to be having a 50 cal deck gun and chasing go fast boats, but.
Yeah, we had those.
Or your rescue swimmers, man. You're what are they called? Or is that what they are?
Yeah, rescue swimmers. Yeah,
man,
it's
those are badass.
one of the hardest. It's like their special forces, one of the most difficult in the out of all services.
Well,
That's no joke.
let's
That
not-
rescue
no joke.
swimming.
Okay, let's not stretch it though. Come on, Chris. We're trying to be nice. Don't.
I did change my name to the pirate boat captain.
I see that. Well, I just have Dan the Pirate. That's it. So I don't know about Pirate Boat Captain. All I see is Dan.
I'll go get an eye patch then.
All right, Navy clause done. Everybody got it. They've got the complete authority to provide and maintain the Navy. Clause 14, moving on, military regulations. This one, so 14, 15, and 16, I feel like we should just read them all together. Now we can go one at a time here. We'll go one at a time. So military regulations, we've got to make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces to make the rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. So where are my quotes on this? So a lot of the things that I get are from a commentary from Justice Joseph Story. And he wrote in his commentaries on the Constitution of the United States from 1833. And he seemed to have a really good handle on what the Constitution meant when it was written. Now, this is only 1833, so I don't know how old he was here in 1833, but he was not very far removed from the Constitution. So when you read his commentaries on it, it holds a little more weight with me than it does when you read attorneys from 2020 talking about what they meant, because a lot of these guys were still around, right, in 1833. You could talk to these people and ask them what they meant. So if you guys get a chance just to read the commentaries on the Constitution of the United States, that's the name of it, 1833 by Justice Joseph Story. In military regulations, he had remarked that the Congress's power to govern and regulate the land and naval forces is a natural incident to the preceding powers to make war, to raise armies, and to provide and maintain a navy. However, the framers had apparently overlooked this whole thing. And what this is doing basically is establishing courts. It's establishing different courts for the military to keep them removed from civilian courts, to keep the military under the rule of the military and under Congress. So we don't have to worry about the states charging these soldiers or trying to put them under state law.
I think that's where the Uniform Code of Military Justice comes in, right, Jim?
Correct. This is where it's all developed from. So the framers had overlooked this just because it was, like he says, it was just it was a natural incident. Nobody thought about it. They had their committee of detail that came and submitted a draft on this. And there was a motion made from the floor to copy the language exactly from the Articles of Confederation. So if we go back to Article 9, which Article 9 in the Articles of Confederation is like everything they forgot to say, it seems like anywhere else is just kind of thrown into 9. But the actual language from there is appointing all the officers of naval forces and commissioning all officers, whatever, in the service of the United States, making rules for the government and regulation of the said land and naval forces and directing their operations. So they took it basically right out of the Articles of Confederation, moved it over here. Anybody got anything before I continue on with this?
No, you nailed it.
All right. I mean, that's basically it. The framers just recognized here that they needed to have a justice system apart from the civilian justice system. Why they give them all the power. Go ahead.
I guess just one thing to add is that if you don't already know, I know you know, Jim, but that's a big thing in our oath every time we enlist and re-enlist or commission. It's to follow that code, the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Every time we do that, it's part of it, and it's directly from this.
I really did know that. You know what? Sometimes you got to worry about that, because when people say, look, I know you know, but for everybody else, what they're really saying is, dumbass, you don't know, and I'm going to educate you. And I thought that's where we were going. So I'm glad I actually did know that, because everybody else thinks the same thing when you say that. Everybody was like, oh, here he goes. He's going to call out Jim. But that's okay. Calling out. This is supposed to be a discussion. So far, we got the same 3 people. Come on, Robin Nowak, get in there. Oh, man, were we supposed to do the pledge? Robin?
We were,
Ah,
but
all
you
right, listen.
started.
What's that? Okay, listen, here's what we'll do. At the end, we'll do the pledge at the very end. That'll be the very last thing we do tonight. All right?
Okay.
Okay. Golly, you know what? You weren't here because of Bear last week, so I just forgot.
I threw you off. I'm sorry.
It's all on me. That's all on me. All right. Yeah, we will end it with the pledge, and we can all go to bed as happy citizens of the United States.
Robin should sing us the Star Spangled Banner.
Let me think about that.
All right, I'm down with that. How come nobody has their cameras on? Robin, no camera. No camera.
See, because I'm eating, but you're more than welcome to watch me.
I don't care. It's just, I like to see people. All right.
We got visitors today, Jim.
Who are your visitors?
Carrie May, Carrie Prowski.
Oh, yeah, yeah, right on.
So the boys are all listening. They're eating.
Yeah.
They are. Listen.
I believe you.
Keep it clean, Jim.
You tell me what to do, Jeff. Not the boss.
Yeah, you do have kids here.
All right, fine. Unless Renee tells me to keep it clean, I'm not, what, is Renee eating too, or is she crocheting? What is she doing? She's eating. Everybody's eating. What's everybody eating so late for? I didn't know this was a thing.
We're not eating.
Maybe
I'm
we'll-
not, I feel left out.
I know, geez, maybe that's what we'll do. Instead of drinking now, we'll all show up
Right.
at different one with a potluck.
Order a pizza?
No, it's not.
I had to eat, otherwise I couldn't drink. So,
This one's the supper club. The after party's the drinking club.
Oh, hey, or this is the.
there we
There you
go.
go.
I like that, Penny.
All right, all right. Well, next week, everybody bring your favorite dish.
Right.
Mike, you got,
This is like pre-gaming for the after party then.
Mike's got a big challenge here because he's a pretty good cook. So I'm looking forward to next week to see what Mike brings. All right. All right. So moving on here, we'll go to clause 15. And this is to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Here we go. The militia. Let me start with the definition of the militia from 1828. Which I assume David's is probably the same. So here is what the definition of a militia was when this thing was written and shortly thereafter. Militia of a country are the able-bodied men organized into companies, regiments, and brigades with officers of all grades and required by law to attend military exercises on certain days only, but at other times left to pursue their usual occupations. So what did I just describe?
Reserves.
Right, National Guard, reserves, right? And we'll get into the Second Amendment. But I think they're pretty clear on what a militia is here when we're talking right now in Section 8 of Article 1. David, do you have anything? Does that pretty much match 1755?
It adds a lot to it, actually. I put the definition in the chat there if anybody wants to see it. But it's real simple. Militia is, and here's a strange word that we're going to have to define. Militia is the trained bands, semicolon, or the standing force of a nation. And then if you look up trained bands, it says in the dictionary in parentheses, I suppose for trained bands. And the definition is the militia, which is circular, but then it says the part of a community trained to martial exercise. So the beginning idea is a little bit more thin, and then by 1828, they've fleshed out.
I would say though in 1755, when that thing was written, I mean, there were no countries that had United States, right? There was just countries.
Right.
Nobody had a constitution. So by the time the Constitution was written, we were more concerned with protecting the states, or not, I shouldn't say more, but we were as concerned with protecting the states as we were with protecting the Union, which is probably the change in the definition, I would guess.
Yep. Yeah, that makes
I don't-
sense.
I don't hate the definition from 1828. You know, and that's one of the arguments. That's one of the arguments with the second from people that are anti-second, or maybe not anti, maybe that's not the right word, is militia being a trained group. You know, it's not a ragtag bunch of rednecks or, you know, whatever that are out there drinking and training on their own with no real certifications, no real organization. So the militia clause is clearly talking about, to me, the National Guard, current day National Guard. Anybody else?
And when this was written, militia was, you know, perhaps the people from Lorain County, the men from Lorain County that would get together, or even smaller, the people from small towns that would get together and defend their communities and eventually come together in smaller forces or rather larger forces to defend. And eventually they became more organized.
Well, obviously, yeah, and the anti-federals were not happy with this at all, right?
No.
They wanted the militias to remain under state control, and their problem was Luther Martin, who objected, said, as it now stands, the Congress will have the power, if they please, to march the whole militia of Maryland to the remotest part of the Union and keep them in service as long as they think proper, without being in any respect dependent upon the government of Maryland for this unlimited exercise of power over its citizens.
That nails it right there, yeah.
Well, and it does, but I still have a problem with, it. How they can federalize so easily. That's my biggest problem.
Right. If I may interject just briefly. The fact that a few sentences earlier, we have to raise and support armies. And then 3 sentences later, we have to provide for calling forth the militia. And there are those that imply or that say that there is a difference between those two. And the federal government is recognizing that there are militias and they want control over them. And that is, recognizing that A, national armies are different than militias, and B, they're all under the command potentially of the federal government. And I think that at the same time, you can understand that that they are stating that those are 2 different entities. They're also taking control over them. And so you're back to the old states' rights versus national rights. If the states have their own armies, but we're not allowed to have standing armies, well, then they call it a militia. Well, whatever it is, we can take control over it.
I think that's because the militias predated the formation of armies and navies federally.
Oh, absolutely. And it's also, we have to remember, this is balanced against a intense hatred of the possibility of having standing armies living with you. And guess what? You get to feed them and clothe them and give them shelter and stuff like that. There are forces opposing each other here. We have to be able to defend ourselves, and it's going to take local people to do it. But we don't want the overreach of standing armies being in place sent from the federal level in the states. And so there's a tension between states and federal level that's not exactly reconciled here. And I think I think Jim points it out very ably that we can see that they clearly understood this difference and they wanted control over both of them. That's all I got.
It's curious that the funding is only for the Army, that they're recognizing that, we're funding the Army, but there are
Right,
militias.
because the militias are either funded by the states or on their own.
Right.
Well, not
So
necessarily.
they don't need to control the funding. They just want to control the commanding of it when
Right.
necessary.
The commanding officers of the militias were often expected to pay their own men out of their own pockets. And so they were many times just volunteer.
Well, this seems like a good a time as any to move on to clause 16, because that's not entirely right. So let's move on to clause 16, which is organizing the militia.
Okay, Jim, I have one quick question. Is there a different definition for insurrection in the 1700s versus now?
I don't think so. If you guys talk amongst yourselves, I'll pull up 1825. I do not have this one highlighted, so give me a minute because my 50-year-old eyes.
What were we looking for?
Insurrection.
Insurrection. Okay.
My
That's a $10 word. I don't know that one.
all right. So in 1825, right? 1828. Insurrection is a rising against civil or political authority, same as now. The open and active oppression of a number of persons to the execution of law in a city or state. It is equivalent to sedition, except in sedition expresses a less extensive rising of citizens. It differs from rebellion, for the latter expresses a revolt. or an attempt to overthrow the government, to establish a different one, or to the place, the country,
So could one say that Seattle maybe could have been an insurrection
sure.
for the Constitution?
And that's where the president was trying to send federal troops in there to
Right.
quell.
And everybody had a shit fit about it.
Right, right.
Oh,
We
What
got,
was above that, right? You said rebellion? Was that the next one?
no, it differs from rebellion. The actual definition says that it differs from rebellion. Where the latter expresses a revolt or an attempt to overthrow the government, whereas they were not trying to overthrow the government.
Okay,
The
yeah, you're right.
direction there was in the very first part of this definition, arising against civil or political authority. The open and active opposition of a number of persons to the execution of law in a city or state.
And that's why he wants everybody there on the 6th.
What? Yeah. What's going on with this thing on the 6th? Who's waving? What the? Oh, Jeff. Hey, geez. I was wondering. I'm looking and I see everybody like. All right. Who you got there, Jeff?
That's my brother.
That's your brother?
No, I'm
Good
kidding.
Lord. Renee, I got questions.
That's my boy.
You look like twins.
This is Rory.
You Rory.
Right on. Hey, Dan,
So cute.
what are you talking about on the 6th, Dan? I see all this. Who wants who where on the 6th?
Well,
That's a big MAGA rally from what I got family that's actually going over there. And I guess Trump is supposed to make an appearance or something too.
A big announcement.
A big announcement of some kind.
I'll see how this plays out before I get involved in this. I don't know. Remember the militias we were talking about with the ragtag bunch of beer drinking? Makes me a little nervous.
What are you calling us?
Hey, I'm just saying. I'm just saying that if we're going, not we, if the militias think that they're going to go to war against the United States of America, they better be pretty well trained.
well, nobody expected the president of the United States to call his people down there for this insurrection act against the other people because everyone's been so embedded in politics for so entire time that nobody would ever thought that it was going to be that guy who was going to call us down there to do that with him. You get what I'm saying?
No, I don't. I
Nope.
lost half of that. I'm having a heck of a time hearing you. You're static.
The radio reception from the Caribbean is pretty bad.
I said nobody ever thought that the president himself was going to ask his people to come down there and help him with the Insurrection Act to get all these other people that he thinks are criminals out of their situation. I mean, even Lynn Wood, his own attorney, said there's a lot of people going to be going to jail here pretty soon. A lot of powerful people. And it could
Right,
just
right.
be,
But that's what they've been saying all along, man. I mean,
yeah.
how many times we heard this? We heard it with Hillary. We heard it with, oh, just wait, it's coming, it's coming. You know what never comes? Jail, ever.
Yeah. So, but no one's ever thought they were going to see the president need his people to come down and back him up for it. Like that's going to be the jump off if it happens, I think. Because he told people to bring provisions. He said bring water and like be ready to stay.
No, he meant twisted tea.
Yeah. You want twisted tea, this thing's over in 24 hours. All right, so let's move on here. Did we do 16 yet, or did we get sidetracked again? Oh, no, we did. We got, somebody else had something to say about that. Let me move on to 16, because I think this is going to play a lot into how we were saying that the states have the rights, complete whatever of the National Guard. So 16 is the Congress shall have power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So I think that's, to me, is kind of where the states lose this thing, because they rely so heavily on the federal government for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. The federal government is still involved. I mean, weapons, and not all, I know. And one of the strangest things to me is when you, like these Air National Guard units, and they show up at air shows, and like the state of Wisconsin will buy an F-16, like owned by the state of Wisconsin. It's just crazy to me. But this is how the federal government keeps their grip on the militias. This is actually why the Second Amendment was proposed and passed. However, when it was passed, it did nothing to to address the issue of the states not maintaining control over their own militias. Even in modern history, you had, so Congress passes a law, or the Montgomery Amendment, back in 1987. It was in protest against the United States actions in Central America during the 80s, and several governors attempted to stop their National Guard, or their reserve National Guard units from being deployed to Honduras and El Salvador for training. In response, Congress passed the amendment, which is a law prohibiting a governor from withholding consent to a unit of the National Guard being ordered to active duty outside of the United States on the ground that the governor objects to the location, purpose, type, and schedule of that duty. I mean, that's it right there. The states, even though it's the National Guard, the states have no right. If the federal government decides they want to call them up, governors have no right to stop them from calling them up and putting them wherever they want to put them. So, I mean, you can say that, you know, National Guard falls back on the states, but it only falls back on the states as long as the federal government allows it.
I think they'd get away with it if it was
What's that?
I think they would get away with it if they had like a natural disaster in their state. They could.
Well, they do, because the federal government has they don't care at that point, right? I mean, you get a big tornado rip through and you can use your National Guard all you want, but as soon as the federal government decides that they want to call them up for military action, the states don't have any right to say anything. And that's where the Second Amendment ended up getting passed. Because they were worried that, well, let me read it here. I thought a good quote. All right, here it is. So bear with me for one paragraph here. The Anti-Federalists feared that Congress would permit the militia to atrophy, leaving the states defenseless against the central government. In the Virginia Ratifying Convention, George Mason, while advocating a stronger central control over the militia, nevertheless argued that there was a danger that Congress could render the militia useless by disarming them under various pretenses. Congress may neglect to provide for arming and disciplining the militia, and the state governments cannot do it, for Congress has the exclusive right to arm them. Does the desire to prevent enfeebling state militias, which provided a check to a standing army, prompted the ratifying conventions to call for an amendment guaranteeing the right of citizens to bear arms. The first Congress responded, but the Second Amendment did not remove national control over the armed forces or the state militias. So that was the worry, right? Because state militias are there to combat a standing army, to combat a tyrant who decides to use his standing army against us. That is what the state militias are supposed to be there for. And right now, the federal government has it right now. Whether or not they would go, I mean, that's always the thing. If there's ever going to be another revolution, you got to make sure the military is on your side. Whatever side controls the military controls the war.
Yeah,
It's
well,
just the way.
AR-15 has nothing against rocket launcher or howitzer.
Sure. And I've always said that. These people that are calling for a revolution against the United States government, you can go out there with your tricked out AR-15, right? With your night vision on it and your tactical stocks and your whatever, and pop off a couple rounds at federal troops. And they're going to certainly respond with a Hellfire missile strike on your neighborhood. So
yeah, you're just LARPing at that point, right?
Right.
You're just LARPing.
Yeah, exactly. That's all you're doing. I mean, you're out there playing war. They are going to devastate you. You know, I mean, it's the most powerful military in the world. You think that your AR-15 is going to be able to take them on? Buddy, we've talked about this before. This is not back in the original revolution where everybody loaded their muskets, shot at each other. Whoever was standing up loaded their muskets and they shot at each other again. Whoever was standing up after that loaded their muskets, and whoever was standing at the end, they won. That ain't how it is. I'm telling you right now, man, my AR-15 is not coming out against federal troops ever.
It won't be a gentleman's war, that's for sure.
It will not. It will not. It's going to be more of a Red Dawn.
I love that movie.
Yeah. So quite the original is great.
I love that movie too. I think I mentioned that once.
The new one is horrid. Just absolutely, it was an abomination.
It was.
So with regards to the National Guard getting called up by the federal government, it's not in the Constitution, but part of the U.S. Code, 10 U.S.C. 12406. That is the National Guard and Federal Service. It says whenever the United States or any of the Commonwealths or possessions is invaded or in danger of invasion by a foreign nation, or there is a rebellion or danger of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, or the president is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States, the president may call into federal service members and units of the National Guard of any state in such numbers as he considers necessary to repel the invasion, suppress the rebellion, or execute those laws. And orders of these purposes shall be issued through the governors of the states, or in the case of the District of Columbia, through the commanding generals of the National Guard of the District of Columbia. And
That kind of goes along with what Braden was asking. Then why the federal government not use their power to end the recent riots?
Well, they tried.
I think it was blocked.
Right.
Tried. I mean, Trump sent troops, right? The states weren't cooperating with it. They were trying to exert their authority over it. But I mean, by the Constitution, he has the right to federalize those troops and stop insurrection. And clearly, like what you see going on in Portland is the very definition of insurrection. I mean, it's not just like a one-night riot where everybody's pissed off about something. I mean, this is clearly an insurrection. And not just
they occupied territory.
They actually occupied part of the city, Seattle, right? The Chaz. I mean, how these governors didn't want the help is beyond me, because they obviously couldn't control it. Seattle actually ceded portions of their city to these people, and it's just insanity. But he did. He tried to send them, and I don't remember why they went, but they weren't getting any cooperation.
no, it wasn't the National Guard that he sent into Portland. It was federal agents. It was U.S. Marshals.
Oh, you're right.
But that was only to protect federal property.
But didn't he try to federalize the Guard units, and the states were refusing to cooperate?
Well, he said, here's the offer. All you have to do is say, I'd like your help. And they never did.
Said no.
So he left it on the states. And I think he did that strategically to show the people that the states didn't want the help. So the people of Portland were like, the offer's out there. Our state is not wanting it. So it looks bad at the Democratic governor of.
All right, I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
I also think we all know why some of those governors refused as well too. But yeah, I do want to echo the only reason that some of those guys even got into those states is because federal property was being destroyed, and
Right.
that's what
No,
allowed
you're right.
Trump
Now
to
that
send them
you
in.
said that, you're right. He did. He sent federal agents in there to protect the interest of the United States. You say what you will about Trump, and maybe it was strategic. Throughout this entire COVID thing, when it comes to constitutionality, I have no problem with anything he did, right? It wasn't up to him for a lot of the COVID stuff to take action. It was up to the states, and he did what he was supposed to do with that. And same thing with the insurrection here, with the riots and things that are going on. I mean, I can appreciate him leaving it up to the states until the state said, hey, look, we are in dire straits here. We need your help. Okay. Here we go. But And maybe it was strategically done, but either way, I will take a president who's going to stand behind the Constitution over one that's usurping its authority. You know what I mean? I mean, somebody who's a little too heavy-handed with or with the National Guard, with sending troops in, versus somebody who, you know, I mean, you're going to let the states deal with this on their own until they feel like they can't deal with it. I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah, that gives more power to the states. You know, it
and that's what they want.
Lessens the federal government. Well, that's not what everybody wants.
Well, no, but they could have gone to him for help if they wanted it. They chose not to.
So they're only looking out to get reelected, that's all.
Well, that's all it is. And they could
Well, I think the reason why they didn't ask for help is because they wanted it to appear that all this bad stuff was happening under Trump's watch.
Okay,
It was a political move not to call him
kind of
in.
hard to say that all this bad stuff happened under Trump's watch when Trump offered up the troops if you just asked for help and you never went to him and said, hey, I need some help.
Yeah,
right?
but that wasn't really reported that much in the mainstream media.
Okay. Number 17.
Stepping into the political side.
Yeah, number 17.
You know what? I disagree. I thought about that, but I disagree. We'll move on. We can move on, but I don't think that we're talking political. We're talking about Trump because he's the president of the United States, right? Had Joe Biden been in there, we would have been talking about Joe Biden's actions as the executive and the way that he was carrying out the Constitution of the United States of America. Yeah. I'm not supporting one candidate or another. I'm not, but I don't think you can.
I just think we're getting a little off track.
The only thing I think is that we started talking about the reasons, the motivations for the actions rather than just the actions. I think that, you know,
fair.
And that's all. I just want to make sure that.
You know what? I'm done.
I think that he's
you guys take care. You guys run your own meetings. I'll see you guys. Everybody take care. Have a good week.
If I could interject just 2 points here. One,
No, wait a minute. Mike already said we're going to 17, so I hope this has something to do with 17, David Davis.
it's a transition. It works as a transition. I think we did a good job of illustrating, though, that the tension that might seem so distant between states' rights and federal rights. On the one hand, we read this and we think, my gosh, what must things have been like back then? And then we move into the conversation about Portland, and it's obvious that there is a discussion about states' rights and federal rights. And point number 2, I will listen to anything Jeff Sandor says because I am mesmerized by his booze shelf.
All right, I am not going to take.
Me too.
I am not taking any responsibility for the fact that David has never talked about booze once. Now he won moonshine, and now all of a sudden he's like booze, 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 booze. That is not my fault.
It's a relapse. My liver can handle it. It's a relapse. It's all.
So
I think we all like Jeff's booze shelf.
I'm never going to get it anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
You just need friends that'll tell you when to say when.
10-minute countdown, 10 minutes till it's time to drink.
All right, I just want to say one more thing about 16. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have a local, relatively local, either Cuyahoga County, Lorraine County, localish National Guard unit that's overseas right now. Can anybody confirm that?
Oh, I'm sure we do.
I'm pretty sure. I think it was called up this year.
Right. Oh, and they have been throughout this entire thing. They're rotating National Guard units in, and they have the right to do that.
Right.
By the Constitution, but I don't know.
Okay, now we can turn the page.
Yeah, we'll turn the page because I've got 10 minutes, and what my goal is here is to get done with section 8 so we can move on to section 9 next week. So moving on to 17 now, which is the enclave clause. Congress shall have the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding 10 miles square, as may, by cessation of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of the government of the United States. In a nutshell, this provides for Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
It takes Washington, D.C., makes it a federal district as opposed to having the seat of the United States under actual control of a state, which doesn't make any sense at all. So this just allows them to set up Washington, D.C.
So I got a question about that.
Yep.
all that scuttlebutt about them wanting to make DC a state, would this in turn tell them pretty much you can't because here it is? Or is that just in general for any kind of federal jurisdiction like that?
Well, here's the problem. Here's why they want to make it a state. Washington, D.C. is not allowed, they don't vote to have representatives in Congress. They do have one non-voting representative, but they are not, the residents of Washington, D.C. are not truly represented in Congress. So there's a push now. There's been different ideas on how they could do this.
Are they taxed?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, sure. Oh, sure.
What about no taxation without representation?
Well,
Therein lies the problem.
but they're not a state.
Good point.
They are not a
But
state.
if they don't have representation, how can they be taxed?
It's only 10 miles by 10 miles. Kick them all out.
And now, you know what?
Well,
This
here's
big-
a fair question. It's like Oberlin, right? So how many of the residents of Oberlin are not true year-round residents that don't go to college? You know what I mean? When you take the college students out that don't live there all year long, Oberlin's a pretty small town, right? So same thing with DC. How many of them are truly residents of DC that don't have a home
Oh, that's
in
probably-
someplace else?
That's fair. And you know what? And I don't know, Jeff, I don't know the taxation question. Because while they're not a state, they're still citizens.
And you can own property in the District of Columbia.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that's your primary residence.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not.
For
It's
most
true, but that
that
was my
live in-
question. You know what I mean?
They license and title automobiles in DC. They have their own license plates. So obviously there's
Yeah.
revenue and taxes occurring. Do
How many of
issue-
those are government vehicles?
No, there's a good population in DC and they're not all federal employees and they're not all, there's a lot of people that are in DC. It's a good
Didn't-
size.
Didn't Heller come out of DC, Jim?
The gun case,
Yeah.
it did. It did.
705,000 people in DC.
Yeah.
Is that the daytime or nighttime population?
No,
No, seriously.
daytime is bigger.
Is that the winter population or the spring population?
No, really. I mean, if you look at Independence, and I can't remember what the numbers are, but Independence, their daytime population is like 4 or 5 times greater than their nighttime population because of the number of people that go there.
Completely believe it. I've been there.
So,
No fun.
so yeah, I mean, they've moved. It's going to take a constitutional amendment to make them a state because of this, because of clause 17 that outlines that they have the right to set up a federal city.
I have another question. So, just hypothetical. If something were to happen to DC, the land, such as a catastrophic event, would the federal government, would this clause give the federal government right to declare eminent domain in another region, another location, and set up a 10 by 10 province or district that they could essentially move
Well,
DC
I mean,
to?
this thing here says, and here's the thing with it. So the rules set out by this are basically in regular speak is that the government decides what land it wants. Then it's got to get permission from the legislatures of the states involved, right? So if they decide now that they're going to go down to South Carolina and set up a new, they would have to, they'd have to get the approval from the legislature. Then they have to buy it. After they buy it, Congress has to approve it. And then fourth, and we haven't gotten to this part yet, the clause 17, the second part of clause 17, and we probably should have read it first. The Congress shall have power to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. All right. So the fourth thing is that it can only be used for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards. And that's one of the things I was going to talk about with this. With 17, there is no provision anywhere in the Constitution for state parks or for national parks, for national monuments, for national forests, for fish and game preserves.
Bureau of Land Management.
Right, but it's not in the Constitution. You can make the Bureau of Land Management all you want. BLM is a freaking terrorist organization. Nobody owns more property in the United States than the United States, especially when you get out west. It's ridiculous. Nowhere in the Constitution does it give them the right to set up national parks. Doesn't do it. All that they're allowed is right here, is what we just said. And if you read it, I mean, that's it. Same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings as they move on and buy other. Now, I made the mistake initially of thinking, man, you know what? DC is only 68 square miles, and they're only, by Constitution, only 10 square miles. But it's not 10 square. It is, what's that?
100 square miles. It's 10.
Right. Well, it's 100. Yeah, right. It's 100 square miles. It's 10 miles squared. So it's a 10 by 10. So they've still got 32. They still got 32 square miles that they can annex or whatever. And grow the Leviathan even bigger. All right. So let me just real quick, I'll finish up with this with 17. So this all started, this came from the fact that James Madison was worried about insults to the public authority by not having a federal city, right? In June of 1783, several hundred unpaid and angry Continental soldiers had marched on Philadelphia, menacing the Confederation Congress meeting in Independence Hall. Pennsylvania refused all requests for assistance, and after 2 days, Congress had to adjourn. Its members fled into New Jersey. That incident made a lasting impression. The framers referenced it over and over again in defending their provision for a federal town, which anti-federalists persisted. Here, this is why I think I'd be an anti-federalist right here. Anti-federalists persisted in visualizing this federal town as a sink of corruption and a potential nursery for tyrants. In fact, however, the framers understood that the need for a territory in which the general government exercised full sovereignty, not beholden to any state, was an inherent necessity for the federal system itself. So I get it, and I agree with that. I don't think that the federal seat for the union should be under Ohio's control or whatever state. When they put this in, they purposely went between two states before this clause went in. But to have it under the authority of one state, it doesn't make any sense. But the anti-federalists were 100% right. Looking back on it now, them visualizing it as a sink of corruption and a potential nursery for tyrants.
So nothing's changed.
That's like the
Oh,
definition.
no, that was their fear, and their fear has come to pass.
They
At the
had an
time, it
idea,
wasn't.
but they had no clue.
Right, well, they had a clue. The anti-federalists had a clue. They said, look, man, one day we see this happening. Sure as shit, here we are. It is absolutely a sink of corruption. So, all right, let me move on here real quick. We're just a little bit over, but I can finish with clause 18 and we can be done with section 8. Clause 18 is the necessary and proper clause to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district. That's 17, sorry. Clause 18, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. So basically what this is giving Congress the authority to carry out their powers allowed by the Constitution. The one that we brought up, right? Congress has the authority to coin money. They can't do it, so they created the Treasury Department, which they're allowed to do under necessary and proper. I think actually the rugged Constitution had a pretty good, where was it? For example, Congress has the power to control foreign and interstate commerce. And because of this clause, Congress also has the power to improve rivers and harbors to aid in such commerce. So it just gives them, it gives them the power without having to go back and, amend the Constitution each time with a new authority. It gives them the authority or whatever they think is necessary and proper for them to carry out what they're already authorized to do. Now, they don't just get to decide it. The Supreme Court obviously can make that decision. If the Supreme Court decides it is not in fact necessary and proper, then they're not going to be allowed to do it. And there's been quite a few challenges as they do these things, as they come up with these different things they claim they need. Anybody? David?
No, I've got nothing to add. There's been some really good stuff tonight. Yeah, I got nothing to add.
I know I moved fast. I got off there once and apparently Mike got all bent out of shape at us. He's been texting me nonstop since that happened. It's unbelievable. And he keeps using crying emojis. So I don't even, it's awkward now at this point. But you know what, we'll talk later, Mike. But Renee brought us back. We're okay. It's okay. And the Coast Guard stuff, we didn't make fun of you too bad. It was a good night. I know I moved fast though, but I was trying to get done with 8. I wanted to be done with this so that we could move on to 9 and get out of Article 1 here, hopefully within a week. Any other questions?
Mike, if you need a therapist, I'm here for you, okay?
Also, just so you guys are aware, tonight, I will certainly go to, I'm going to be at the after party thing there where we can talk about some stuff. However, my daughter is having a sleepover tonight with 2 girls, and they have a new ping pong table, and it is going to be probably 18 feet away from me. So it's going to be a little loud. Get pissed off. I'm just going to call it a night, but I'll start by showing up at least.
Are they playing beer pong or ping pong?
No, ping pong. Ping pong. They're 13. They're 13.
Oh, that's when it starts.
This is why Children's Services is in your life, Dan. All right. So I think we got to listen. We are going to end this now with the pledge because we forgot it. Hey, on your feet, young man. Come on, Jax. Let's go. Whatever.
Get on your feet.
All right, here we go. Here's the
Everybody
pledge.
up.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
My man.
Well
Man. All right.
With the flag, David.
Yeah, good job, Dave. All right, I'm out. I'm going to end it right there, and I will see you guys here in a little bit.
All right.
All right.
Later, everybody.
Yeah.